Hello, I'm Richard Toye of the University of Exeter's Centre for Imperial and Global History, and I'm here with my colleague Dr. Ljubica Spaskovska, who gave a very interesting paper yesterday which was about the Skopje earthquake of 1963, and that paper is going to be developed into an article in the Journal of World History, I believe, coming out next year.
Yes.
So tell us about the Skopje earthquake and why it was so significant.
Well, as you mentioned, it happened in 1963, so in a very specific kind of European and international context, just a year after the Cuban Missile Crisis, very soon after the erection of the Berlin Wall, and just 2 years after the foundation of the non-aligned movement and the first Belgrade Summit in 1961. So the moment this earthquake struck Skopje, basically destroying most of the housing and public buildings and causing around 2,000 victims, it immediately elicited a huge and unexpected international response. So it was the city where, for the first time after the Second World War and the famous Alba meeting, Soviet and American troops met for the first time, and not just met, but actually worked together on the initial relief and reconstruction of the city.
And this is quite in contrast, obviously, to our sort of typical view of how the Cold War really operated.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, Yugoslavia was this country which tried to kind of carve out a new role for itself after the split with the Soviet Union in 1948. And with the Belgrade Summit and the non-aligned movement, it was seen as the uncommitted European nation, which basically each bloc wanted to have on its side. So both the Americans and the Russians had very pragmatic interests, kind of to keep Tito afloat on the one hand, but also to help Yugoslavia flourish.
And in a sense, it wasn't just about earthquake relief, it was about a kind of a massive program of rebuilding on modernist lines.
Absolutely. So I talk in the paper about this notion of developmental modernism, which was very present and basically framed the whole development and reconstruction effort, which went well into the 1980s. So Kenzo Tange, the famous Japanese architect, won the project, the international competition for the design and the urban plan of the city center. But many more experts, around 150 from all over the world, including British urban planners, seismic engineers, Soviets, the Poles especially, who were very well known for their reconstruction and urban planning efforts after the Second World War in Warsaw. So they were all involved in this massive kind of project, sponsored principally by the UN Special Fund, later the UN Development Program.
And there was also a story about Bradford and a double-decker bus.
Yes, interestingly, well, the links go even beyond before the earthquake, because Bradford and Skopje started a twinning agreement, negotiations in 1961-62, and there were already commercial and economic links between the two cities, which were considered two industrial towns, etc. So when the earthquake struck, the University of Bradford, which had Fred Singleton, a leading expert and researcher on Yugoslav history and Yugoslav studies, they organized these groups of students initially who came to work on the reconstruction and really the relief. But later on, throughout the years, there were regular exchanges. Students were put on industrial placements in each city. There were also university staff exchanged. So it was really a very, I think, dynamic relationship between the two cities.
Now, when listening to your paper yesterday, there was this story of all this international cooperation, and I kept thinking, and shortly she's going to tell us of the moment where it all went horribly wrong. It didn't actually happen. You actually sort of located something in history which is a good news story.
I do point out, though, that it was a very short-lived moment. I think it really encapsulates this post-war social consensus, or a consensus around the so-called welfare state modernism. And it does peter out in the late 1970s. I mean, in the West Yorkshire archive, I could see how there are less and less documents by the late 1970s of these exchanges, because also the city councils were traveling, often the Lord Mayor of Bradford, etc., the Mayor of Skopje. But by the early 1980s, I think with stagflation in the West, with inflation in Yugoslavia, simply there was no money anymore for this type of activities.
Ljubica, thank you very much.
Thank you.